Welcome to Bankole Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. Mayor Mike Duggan, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, was a no-show at the funeral this morning at Detroit's Triumph Church of two little black kids who died in freezing winter inside their mother's vehicle in the parking lot of a downtown Detroit casino because their mother could not find a shelter, a place to stay. Why was Mayor Mike Duggan not at the funeral today? A special commentary coming from me. Bankole's Nation Extra. Stay with us. Welcome back to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. This is an extra edition of Bankole's Nation this week because I realized I saw something today that I need to say. And it takes people like me to publicly say what needs to be said, because not everybody will be willing to say what needs to be said. We've read about the news. It became a national story the last 2 weeks of two little kids. 2-year-old A'millah Currie and 9-year-old Darnell Currie Jr., both Detroiters, who died inside their mother's vehicle in a casino parking lot in downtown Detroit. In freezing winter, they froze to death, as it was reported, because they could not find a place to stay. They could not find a shelter. They've called the city of Detroit homeless network several times, as it was reported, and got no answer. So today, on Thursday, I attended the funeral. I didn't know this family, but I read about it. I wrote a column about it, chastising city leadership under Mayor Mike Duggan. And we've done podcast interviews. In fact, just this week, with Dr. Chad Audi, the president and CEO of the Detroit Rescue Mission Ministries. We've stayed on this case because I find it very unconscionable that a city like Detroit will allow two little kids, unoffending, innocent, harmless kids, to die in freezing winter. There is no comeback in Detroit if kids are dying like this in the city of Detroit. So I attended the funeral for A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie. It was a solemn ceremony. It was held at Detroit's Triumph Church. The Reverend Solomon W. Kenlock Jr., the senior pastor, gave a very powerful eulogy. The church's chief of staff, Reverend Ralph Gadby, officiated. I went to the funeral because I wanted to pay my respect. I went to the funeral to honor A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie Jr., these two little kids who did not have to die. What I saw at the funeral, the homegoing, was unacceptable. Guess who was not there? Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan was not at the homegoing service and ceremony for A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie, two little kids who died in his city under his leadership. All that the mayor has done so far was to publicly talk about asking for a review of the homeless network to see how the system failed. But did you know that man did not show up? Mayor Mike Duggan, Detroit's first white mayor in 40 years, did not show up at a funeral for these two little black kids, A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie, brother and sister. When I walked into Triumph Church, I was moved. At one point I felt I was angry. I said, this is unacceptable. And I was talking to some of the other folk who also attended to show their respect, just how unacceptable this is. That we should not allow, this cannot happen in a city like Detroit. But the mayor, the leader of the city, did not show up. Whatever his excuses are, whatever business he got to take care of, we know Mayor Mike Duggan. He shows up where he wants to show up. He shows up where his interest lies. And I posted on Facebook, which has gotten shared a lot, that the reason why I believe Mike Duggan did not show up is because he's not running for re-election. He announced that he isn't running for re-election. He wants to run for governor. So he probably has checked out. But the fact that we have a mayor like Mike Duggan, who did not see the need to show up at that funeral, should have been one of those speaking from that pulpit at Triumph Church this morning, to speak for those little black children, to speak for A'millah Currie, and to speak for Darnell Currie, and to make a rallying call and summon the conscience of other leaders like himself that they need to do better. But Mike Duggan was not at the funeral. And I want you to know this. I want you to remember this, that Mayor Mike Duggan was not at the funeral today for A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie. And I looked at the casket. Beautifully done. The eulogist, Reverend Ken Locke, said something that we all know, that parents don't bury their child. It's the other way around. It's not the normal cycle of life. It is not the natural order of things for parents to bury their kids. It's the other way around. People pray for longevity and for hope that at some point, as they grow old, their kids will send them away, not them sending their kids away. And one would have thought that the mayor of the city of Detroit, Mike Duggan, will have a conscience, will demonstrate that he has a soul in him, will demonstrate that he has empathy in him by showing up at that funeral and speaking at the funeral. Why didn't he show up? I have no idea. But I said this publicly already on social media. I said, Mike Duggan is very cunning. He's very calculating. He's a quintessential politician. I know him so well. That's why I've stayed on him like white on rice throughout his mayorship. I have been his biggest critique. His biggest critic in the media. I have been his biggest critic on the media, because I don't see him as someone who has extra talent. He's not extraordinarily powerful than any other politician. He's just like any same old politician, cunning and calculated. If he was running for re-election, I bet you this, Mayor Duggan would have been at Triumph Church this morning for the funeral of these two little black kids. He would have been there. He would have made a statement. He would have summoned a rallying call. That's what he would have done. But apparently he's not running for re-election for mayor anymore. He's checked out, probably. He's checked out. You know, I said the least he could have done was to show up. The least he could have done was to show up. But I get it. Because these two little black kids, A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie, whom we sent away as heroes this morning at Triumph Church, did not have the high-profile background that Mike Duggan is used to. They don't have allies at the highest levels of political and economic power. And I said, perhaps Mayor Duggan doesn't see himself in these two little black kids. So what do I care? To heck with it. I'm just going to issue a statement publicly. We're going to do a review about what happened here, and that's it. But I wouldn't show up at the funeral. But I want to ask a question. I want to ask you this question. If A'millah Currie, and I keep repeating their names because I don't want us to forget these black kids, their names. If A'millah Currie and Darnell Currie were two white children, let me repeat and quote me. Bankole Thompson is saying on his podcast, Bankole's Nation. If A'millah Currie, 2-year-old A'millah Currie, and a 9-year-old Darnell Currie, if they were white kids, would Mike Duggan have showed up at the funeral this morning at Triumph Church. Think about that. He probably would have showed up. And this is where we are. This is where we are. I attended that funeral today because I believe that their lives matter. I believe that Darnell Currie's life matters. I believe that A'millah Currie's life matters. I walked up to the caskets. I looked at these little innocent offending kids in the casket, and I shook my head in anger and disgust. Say, how do we let this happen? How does this happen? In a city that says it's coming back, in a city that says it's revitalized, how does this happen? And the mayor of the city doesn't have the conscience to show up at the funeral. Does Mike Duggan have any soul in him? Does he have any empathy in him? Think about it. And I don't care where you stand in the political ledger. I don't care if you're a Duggan supporter or not a Duggan supporter. This is simply talking about empathy, showing leadership, demonstrating that you care, demonstrating that being the mayor means you're the father of the city and you're in charge over the lives of the thousands of people who call Detroit home. And if you don't see the need to show up at the funeral, the homegoing service of these two little black kids, I wonder what else you wouldn't show up to. I wonder what else Mike Duggan wouldn't show up to. You know, one of our national Emmy award-winning TV producers, television producer par excellence, Tony Motley, posted on my Facebook post when I posted this about Mike Duggan. I want to read what Tony Motley said. I want to read it to you. He said, Mr. Duggan is not a neophyte, and God knows he understands optics. In the words of the late and boisterous Howard Cosell, quote, let's not fool the public, unquote. This was an intentional act. If things were different, Duggan would have moved mountains for such a sympathetic photo op. He chose not to because it was just too inconvenient for his future political aspirations. That is not leadership. From Emmy award-winning television producer Tony Motley in Detroit, responding. And many people have been responding to my post on Facebook. People have been sharing it. Think about it. Man, this is not about you, whether you support the mayor and what he's done or not. This moment calls for empathy, empathetic leadership. This moment calls for the mayor to stand up and demonstrate that he is a father to the city. What I wanted to see when I walked into Triumph Church this morning, whatever was on my calendar this morning, I cleared it out because I wanted to attend that funeral, to pay my respect and to honor these two little black kids. What I wanted when I walked into Triumph Church was to see the mayor consoling the parents, consoling the family, and vowing that this will not happen again in the city of Detroit. But Mike Duggan was not sure. Mike Duggan was not sure. Now there are folks who say, well, listen, Bankole, we know Mike Duggan. That's how he is. Mike Duggan was not sure. Oh, I know Mike Duggan is an Irish Catholic. Oh, Bankole, why are you going down there? Going down the road of his religion. I know he's Catholic. Oh, but I know Pope Francis will have something to say about Mike Duggan. Probably would have scolded him for not showing up. Because Pope Francis stands with the poor. Mike Duggan doesn't stand with the poor. He acts like he stands with the poor. He speaks like he stands with the poor. And I'm yet to see his anti-poverty policy. I'm yet to see Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan or Detroit's outgoing mayor Mike Duggan's anti-poverty policy. And as I wind down this Bankole's Nation Extra, I want you to hear me carefully. I've been Mayor Duggan's biggest critic in the media in Michigan. And every time that people talk about him, oh, why you go so hard on the mayor? I say he's a politician. And more importantly, you know what I tell people? I'm not his slave. Bankole Thompson is not his slave. I am not his slave. He's a politician. I'll treat him just like I treated every other politician, including former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. So he's no different. But let me tell you what I've observed. Mike Duggan has gotten a free pass in the Detroit media. He's gotten a free pass in the Detroit media. I believe, and as a veteran of this business, as a veteran of the Fourth Estate, as a standard bearer for economic justice in Detroit, someone who has had a front row seat for a long time in this city, who has observed media politics and local politics in Detroit for such a long time, I can tell you this. This is what I believe. If Mike Duggan was a black mayor and he did not show up at this funeral for these little black kids, the media would have been asking the question, where is the mayor? They would have put this at his feet. They would have raised all kinds of questions. But he's getting a free pass because nobody's going to put a microphone to his face and say, why didn't you show up? The families, the mother of the kids have been calling the city for help. They got no real help from the city. Why didn't you show up at the funeral? That's the least you could do. That's what they would have asked if it was a black mayor. But Mike Duggan has gotten a free pass in the Detroit media. I remember several years ago, during his first time in office, a prominent white television anchor correspondent told me in the parking lot, said, Bankole. I said, what? He said to me, the media gatekeepers have looked the other way on Mike Duggan. And you know what my response was? Bankole Thompson will not look the other way on Mike Duggan. And that's why I've stayed on him like white on rice, because I know who I'm dealing with. I know him very well. And to this day, when I run into him, he can't look me in my face. When he sees me coming, he goes the other way. But there's a moment that calls for all of us to have empathy, to show empathy. And that moment was today at the homegoing ceremony, the homegoing service of these two little black kids. Who deserve to be treated with dignity, who deserve to be sent away with dignity, which is what was done today. They were sent away as heroes at Triumph Church. Reverend Kenlock gave a powerful eulogy. They were sent away as heroes at Triumph Church, even though they're the victims of poverty in Mayor Mike Duggan's Detroit. So I want you to think about that. Think about it. And I needed to come on my podcast to say this because I did not want this moment to pass by without me going on the record to let these people know and let Mike Duggan know that we know what he did to them. Thank you so much for being here.